Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session of Quispamsis Town Council for November 7th, 2023. May I have an approval of the agenda, please? Deputy Mayor Scryer, seconded by Councillor Miller. On the question, please vote now. Councillor Miller, please vote. Not working. Motion carried unanimously. Councillor Luck, would you do the treaty acknowledgement, please, and the moment of reflection? Yeah, there's lots of time. I'm going to do the mayor's comments. So I have a few comments this evening. Just over a week ago, Mayor Grant of Rossay and myself received the first poppy of the Kennebecasis Legion Branch 58 to kick off the Legion's 2023 poppy campaign. I was also honored and humbled to pin a poppy on one of our older senior veterans, Lloyd Saunier. And I want to encourage everyone to wear a poppy as we honor our veterans, past and present, who have served with great dignity and sacrificed so much to ensure our freedom. Poppies are available at the Legion's new office on 8 River Road in Rossay and in many locations of businesses throughout our town, and also right here at the town hall at our administration desk. Once again this year, we have 2 Remembrance Day ceremonies in the Kennebecasis Valley on Saturday, November the 11th. One is an indoor ceremony, and it will be held at the Qplex. The front doors open at 9:30 a.m., with the ceremony beginning at 10:30. All those planning to attend are asked to be in the building and seated by 10:15. There will be a short Remembrance Day memorial service at the Cenotaph on the Rossay Common beginning at 10:45. Also this week, I had the pleasure of attending a special church service over the weekend at Our Lady of Perpetual Help. The church was marking its 70th anniversary as a parish in the town of Rossay. Mayor Grant and I were invited to join the celebration on Sunday. About half of the congregation at Our Lady of Perpetual Help comes from the town of Quispamsis. Our Premier and Quispamsis MLA Blaine Higgs also attended the service on Saturday night. The town of Quispamsis annual tree lighting is coming up on November the 22nd, Wednesday at 6:30 at the Arts and Cultural Park. Hopefully we will see everyone there. It is such a special night. Our staff do an amazing job of putting together a beautiful holiday dreamland display with thousands of LED lights to make it bright and festive. And thank you to the Community Services Department for all the work of your employees over there. It's wonderful. Also, please bring a travel mug with you from home and enjoy a hot beverage at this event. We'll also have a light refreshment and a special visit from Santa. Special thanks to our sponsors, Tim Hortons, MB Power, Papadop Smiles Orthodontics, and the Brador Sea Cadets. Again, on this theme, the 25th Annual KV Santa Claus Parade is coming up on Saturday, November 25th. It will start at 6 p.m. at the Kennebecasis Valley High School and travel down the Hampton Road before ending at the intersection with Marr Road and Clark Road. There will be a quiet area between Autumn Avenue and Pinewood Crescent for anyone with sensitivities to the louder sounds of music. For anyone interested in participating this year in our parade, the deadline for applications is November the 15th. You can find a link to the application on our social media and on our website, quispamsis.ca, under upcoming events. And finally, the 2023 Para Hockey Cup is approaching quickly. This international tournament will see Team Canada host the USA, China, and Chechnya from December 3rd to December 9th at the Qplex. Ticket packages for the full tournament, that's one ticket for each of the 10 games, are available at hockeycanada.ca, starting at $97.20. Don't forget, we also have an exhibition game between Canada and the USA on Friday, December 1st at the Qplex. Tickets are $10 for that and are available at the Qplex Administration Office during regular business hours. We are proud that another Hockey Canada event has chosen Quispamsis, and we are excited to show off our community to the world. Again, thank you to Community Services for your work, Ms. Burton-Dixon, in bringing another international event to our town. So that's all I have. So, Councillor Luck, I'll pass it over to you for the treaty acknowledgement and moment of reflection.
Thank you, Your Worship. We would like to respectfully acknowledge that Quispamsis exists on the traditional territory of the Wolastoqiyik, Maliseet, and Micmac people, whose ancestors, along with the Passamaquoddy tribes, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s. We would like to take this moment to pay respect to the elders, past and present, and the descendants of this traditional territory. And may we remind ourselves on the important work we have before us tonight. May we make good decisions without prejudice or bias, and always in the best interest of our community, which we are here to serve.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. Looking for a disclosure of interest. There are none. Presentations. This evening we have Marie Langlois. Bienvenue. Merci. For the LIFPA Don Bosco, a French international school. And as all of you know, we have a new school coming to our region, and Marie is going to tell us a little bit about it. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you so much, and thank you for giving me the floor and the opportunity to address you as representatives of the community. It's very difficult to present the school in 5 minutes. To 10 minutes. I'm gonna try and do my best without boring you or overwhelming you with too much information, hopefully. I'm very happy to show you the designs and the vision of the architects for the new facade of the former New Brunswick Museum that we're going to occupy starting in September 2024. And so I'm Marie and I represent the LIFPA. I also wanted to introduce you the team. First of all, we have Sylvain, who is our director and CEO. He's been a director in France for almost 30 years now. He's currently directing a huge and challenging school in the south of France, where I come from, and I've been teaching in that school for 8 years before coming here 3 months ago and work as a development manager here. So my two missions here are enrolling the students, local students, and finding host families for our international students. Ellen has the same mission as I do, but in Europe, kind of in reverse. Manon is our communication director, Janine is our educational training expert, and Anilor is the first teacher that we are officially presenting to the public. We are recruiting currently. She's going to teach physical education and economic and social sciences. The LIFPA is a French international school, but I also wanted to emphasize the fact that it's not only for French students and it's not only for Francophone families. You're very familiar with the immersion system, and we know and we are aware that immersion is the best way to learn a language. So we open our doors even to students who might not know or have prior knowledge of French. And we are enrolling students from the age of 2 to 18. And it's also important to note that from 2 to 6, there will be, in addition to the school curriculum, a daycare program as well to offer more flexibility to the families. And the school wants to be to serve the community and be part of the community. And this is why it was important for me to talk to you tonight as well. So we have lots of strength, of course, and I really want to concentrate on the fact that so all the teachers are certified teachers. You can skip to the next one. Thank you so much. And we know that bilingualism, especially in New Brunswick, is a great strength and asset for everyone, and especially young students on an academic point of view, but also later on for employers. And 70% of lessons are going to be taught in French, but 30% in English, because we don't want to create a gap in the level of English of students locally, of course. And since we want to concentrate on individual, each and every one of our students, there will be a maximum of 22 students per class. As I said, the actual learning starts at the age of 2. It's the age at which students in French start school. And you can move on to the next slide. Thank you so much. I don't want to talk too much about the diplomas. I just wanted to state the fact that we are going to offer the IB starting in 2025, so the year after opening. But if you know the French baccalaureate, it was actually the basis for the IB, and it's a great credentials for lots of universities. It's actually, acknowledged by all universities everywhere. The main focus in the LIFBA would be we thrive for our students' self-realization. We believe that each of our students, as I said before, is unique and has a specific talents. Some students need help to discover it and nurture it, and this is our commitment. So we've been professionals in helping, adjusting, teaching to help those students. It can be a kid with a learning disability, such as dyslexia. It can be a kid with ADHD, or a kid on a spectrum, a kid who suffered from bullying in prior years and kind of have a phobia of school. We put everything we can in place to help them thrive and nurture their talents. Of course, we are an international school, so cultural openness is very important. As we are offering opportunities to our French students, I'm going to go back to that in a few minutes. We also offer opportunities for Canadian students to have spent time abroad in our partner schools. And we are looking for host families for our 100 students that will come each year. They can come for 3, 6, or 11 months, and they will be between the age of 12 and 18, and we really wanted to create, both for them and the community, a cultural exchange. And this is why it was very important to have that host families, in place, and not only a boarding school. And the fact that, bringing cultural diversity and cultural openness to the students and a specific educational guidance will allow students to develop their autonomy and soft skills, and will develop both on an academic point of view, but also personal one. It's very important. We are preparing future adults, so this is very important, and the partnerships that we offer is also a great way to build solid grounds for the future of those students. And this is why the organization is serving the students and their families. I gave some practical information on, when is the school open and what is the rhythm. Of course, there is a focus on extracurricular activities, which are very important. There are homework assistance services offered, and as I said, daycare programs, so that parents can have more flexibilities before and after school hours. Enrollments has started, and the fees are on the screens. We are a private school, so there are fees, and I wanted to save time if you have questions, so I guess that now would be the perfect time. thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Marie. Certainly very interesting and a nice addition to the region. Do any of the councillors have any questions or comments? Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. When host families host children from other countries that come here, what does that look like? Do they have to bring the kids to school every day, bring them home, or is there transportation arranged, things like that?
We want to make things as easy as possible for the families, and we know the family from Quispamsis to get to the uptown of St. John can be a bit complex, so we are working towards having a drop-off location so that parents can drop their kids, and then those autonomously take the bus and then go uptown and start their day, which is very usual for French and European students to have autonomy on this and take the bus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, please.
Merci, bienvenue à Quispamsis.
Merci beaucoup.
I'll do the rest of them in English, okay? Because I don't think too many other people, are. Mr. Kennedy speaks very good French, but a couple questions. First, thank you for your presentation. I think it's a great initiative. I have a couple questions, though. You've got children from age 2 to 18. About how many students are going to be enrolled in each age group? Do you have a...
Well, it's still difficult today to establish this. We know that sometimes at the beginning when international schools open, they tend to have a mix of different grades together. We know for sure that the maximum per class would be 22. We're not sure now what the number of students for each grade is going to actually look like next year.
Okay. And other questions too is, if somebody here in the St. John region would like to send their child to this school, does one of their parents have to be a Francophone?
No, this is actually a great question. Thank you for asking it. No, a lot of people have been asking that question. I know that to access the Francophone system, you need to have a member of your family that speaks French. It's not the case for us. There will always be someone speaking English if the parents don't speak French, and no, there are no requirements to enroll your kid.
Okay. Can I do more? Okay. Also, are you going to have any association with Sam de Cham?
We are met with them and we are working with them a lot, especially in the teaching for teachers, and to have an exchange in practices and talk about pedagogy and have a true exchange on this, and maybe have some part of our staff working also with them. And we are willing to, what we want to do is not be a competition, but just add something to the offer in the Francophone education here.
Okay. A suggestion there, if you don't mind, is
of course
there's a lot of people out here, not a lot, but there's a fair amount that go to Sam de Cham in town. So if they can take that Sam de Cham bus into Sam de Cham, you've only got to bring them downtown, right? So that may help you. A question to tag along, Councillor Lux, is I do know some people that do have children from different regions staying with them now. And I do believe they get paid some type of, I'm going to call it a stipend. Is that the same for this school?
Yeah, we did. So we did not want to give a full remuneration. From experience, we don't want the people to host a student for the wrong reason. But we also are aware that hosting is a commitment. So we wanted to participate. So the compensation are on one of those slides. It would be, no worries. It would be 540 for 3 months, and 1,080 for 6 months, and 2,000 for the 11-month period.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed that.
No, don't worry.
Councillor Bigger, did you have a...
No.
Okay. Councillor Donovan.
Thank you. I would, and thank you so much for your presentation. I would move that Miss Langlois be thanked for her informative presentation, bringing awareness to the upcoming opening of the LIFPA International School in September of 2024 at Market Square in St. John, as well as for bringing awareness to the billet opportunities for hosting exchange students from Europe who will be attending the international school, and that a link to more information on the school be included on the town's website to help promote this worthwhile cultural initiative.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question, please vote now. Deputy Mayor, okay, and Councillor Luck is okay. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much for your time here this evening, and we will certainly post the information and best wishes for a successful opening in September of 2024. Moving on to item number 6, public hearings. There are none. Item number 7, minutes of the previous meeting, October 7th, 2023, regular meeting. Councillor Bigger.
Just right, there we go. Thank you, Your Worship. Just would move that the minutes be approved as prepared.
It's been moved by Councillor Bigger, seconded by Councillor Donovan. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7B, October 24th, 2023, special meeting, proposed 2024 budget. It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Miller. On the question, Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted clarity on page 3. It's, I guess, the second point from the bottom. It says, due to high costs associated with moving power poles, lack of road shoulder, and deep ditches on one side of the road, a single AT lane will be established from Cobblestone to Fuller. My understanding was it would be from Collingwood, and that wouldn't happen until 2025 paving, and I'm just wondering if that's the case. I was wondering if...
I can seek clarification
Okay.
from the engineering director and correct them if required.
Okay.
Did you get the question? Ms. Snow?
Yes, the active transportation, the double lane where.
Yeah, just because I think during our conversation, yeah, I think Cobblestone to Collingwood would be doing it in 2024, and I believe it's still going as per the road. And then when we get to Collingwood to Fuller, I thought that's where they were talking about the one lane. So I just wanted clarity on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Scryer, please, on the question.
I have a question on the Ritchie Lake assessment. It was my understanding that we applied to the Environmental Trust Fund last year for Ritchie Lake. And so I'm sort of confused on these notes. It says Ritchie Lake Assessment and Action Plan Study, 30,000, reapply for funding 2024. So were we not successful this year we were not successful, so we're applying again?
I think that's fine.
Did we get anything from the Environmental Trust Fund?
Yes, Your Worship, we did. It's a test off the top of my head, but we didn't get the funding for Ritchie Lake. There was some other Environmental Trust Fund grants at various levels.
Is that all, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, please.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Actually, it was in with regards to that question. I was actually speaking. Krista's not on the line, is she? Oh, is she? Oh, because I think we talked about that, her and I, earlier today. So maybe she can.
Ms. Brandon, are you there?
Through your worship, yes, I am. So what Councillor Miller is referring to is we discussed, so in our 2023 budget, we had some active transportation funding and the study for the Ritchie Lake. As has been indicated, we weren't successful in receiving that funding. So we are going to be reapplying again. For that funding, and we'll be carrying forward any dollars from 2023 into 2024 for that. So when I'm going through the budget minutes, through the tax rate changes, I can kind of go through and highlight the impact to the budget at that point in time.
Thank you, Ms. Brandon. On the question, please vote now. Okay. Okay. What did we do, Ken? Motion carried unanimously. And we will go with council's approval, if you don't mind. We'll go to item number 9, which is a, under correspondence, the rezoning application, owners Dr. Abid Hajidaseh and Dr. Arfan Hajidaseh, 29 Pettingill Road, NC to CC. So if you would like to come, this is to match the correct zoning with the current use. No changes are proposed for the existing dental clinic. Proposed zoning bylaw amendment will correct the restrictive nature in terms of permitted number of employees on a professional office. So this evening we have Dr. Jeffrey Morrison with us. Welcome, Dr. Morrison.
I had included a letter just with some information to accompany the application. But if there's any other questions or if you'd like me to explain more, I certainly can. We built the building in 2004, and at the time we had it zoned neighborhood commercial. And shortly after that, we were made aware of the, I guess, blanket rezoning of the lower part of the Pettingill Road, which we mistakenly assumed included us. So shortly after that, I'm not sure if it was a property tax bill or something came along that confirmed we saw central commercial written on it, not realizing that it only applied to half of our property, not the whole property. So we just would like to try to correct this on paper. We, over the years, we've grown beyond what the neighborhood commercial zoning would allow, and we would just, like to put this right on paper. We aren't proposing any changes at all. We have a new dentist that's joining us who's phasing into the practice of a retiring dentist. So there'd be no net change in dentists or staff or patients. We're not changing the building or the property or anything. It's just, like I say, strictly to correct things on paper.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Councillor Donovan, please.
Thank you. I'd move that council refer the rezoning application to the Planning Advisory Committee and set a public hearing date for December 5th, 2023. And send notice to property owners within a 100 meter radius of the subject property.
Okay. It's been moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Bigger on the question. Councillor Olson? No? No. Please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Thank you for being here this evening, Dr. Morrison. I'm going to go to 9B, and then I'm going to do item number 10, and then we'll go back to the, just so that we don't keep people waiting. So item 9B, recommendations from nominating committee for new committee appointments. Deputy Mayor Scryer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that council approve the nominating committee's recommendations to appoint Gina O'Rourke McKay as the town's representative on Pro Kids, appoint Councillor Noah Donovan to the Canada-Cases Valley Fire Board, Inc., replacing Councillor Mike Bigger, and appoint Councillor Mike Bigger to the Canada-Cases Regional Board of Police Commissioners, replacing Mayor Libby O'Hara, and each of the new committee appointments to become effective immediately and expire on June 30th, 2026. And further, each of the outgoing commission members be thanked for their service on behalf of the town.
Thank you. It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Scryer. It's been seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question. There are none. Please vote now. Motion carried 6-0. Thank you very much. Item number 10A. Proposed stop up and close bylaw number 065, a bylaw to stop up and close a portion of Cedar Grove Drive. Councillor Olson.
Yes, I'd move council refer the Cedar Grove Drive stop up and close request to the Planning Advisory Committee and set a public hearing for November 21st, 2023.
It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Donovan. On the question. Deputy Mayor Scryer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just looking for some clarification. So I'm familiar with the Cedar Grove and how it stops at the end. So are we talking about, like, there's a path there that comes out from the Legion Court. If you, well, it's blocked now, you can't use that path anymore, but there's been talk of Legion Court doing an expansion. So I'm just wondering if this stop and close would affect, if there was decided that the Legion was going to expand and they wanted another entrance through Cedar Grove, would that prevent that from happening from this stop and close, or am I?
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Coburn, our development officer. Mr. Coburn.
Through you, Worship, to Councillor Scryer. So the request to stop up and close is for a portion of Cedar Grove that's prior to the actual end of Cedar Grove. It would be sort of in, I believe it's the Christa Avenue area. So it would have been the earlier phases of Cedar Grove before the extension all the way to where it ends today would have occurred. So what happened was when they did the initial phases of Cedar Grove, that particular area was actually supposed to have just been a temporary turnaround area. When the street was extended, that was supposed to have been sort of adjusted. But the way it was mapped and registered in the subdivision plan, it actually made it a portion of the right-of-way. So where it's located will have no impact on access to trails or access to Ritchie Lake or anything of that nature. It's basically it's actually on the subdivision plan, which I've included in my report. It actually shows it as a temporary turnaround area, but there is no delineation to separate the actual right-of-way from that portion that was supposed to have been a temporary turnaround. So it's not going to impact in terms of any usage of the street, any future access to the trail at the end of Cedar Grove. It also abuts land for public purposes, which is on the Ritchie Lake side. It won't impact any access that way either if that was explored in the future. So we're looking at basically about 5.4, 5.5 meters in terms of width that's being stop up and close.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn.
Not.
Deputy Mayor Scott.
So why does it have to be a stop up and close then? Like, I don't understand, like,
Through your worship, it has to be a stop up and close because it's actually registered with the province as being a public right of way. So it's actually registered with the province as being a public right of way. And in order for the municipality to release its interest in it, you first have to stop up and close it as a public right of way. Once that goes through the process, then you can release the portion accordingly. The options are you can stop up and close permanently, which is a request that's before council. You can stop up and close temporarily, or for a number of years, or you can stop up and close and actually lease that portion for another purpose. But in this particular case, the request is that it stop up and close permanently. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Coburn. Anything further? It has been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Donovan. Please vote now. Councillor Donovan. Motion carried 6-0. Okay, I think now we will go back to item 8A, unfinished business, presentation of updated proposed budget with actual tax base amount and budget deliberations from October 24th of 2023 special meeting. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just before I pass this over to our town treasurer, I just wanted to bring a couple of things to council's attention. In Councillor Miller's note that's in the council package, looking for an update on our letter to the provincial government and Minister Savoy on including credit for the Qplex as a regional facility. The original letter was sent on June 29th, just days after Minister Savoy was appointed as the minister of that department, replacing Minister Alain. We did not receive a response. We sent a follow-up on October 26th and did not receive a response to that, not even a thank you and acknowledging the letter. So we're going to give that another try again in the next couple of days. I'm assuming it just got lost in the system, and we thought the follow-up a week and a half ago might have helped with that. The other thing I wanted to just bring to council's attention before the treasurer speaks as well is what's before you tonight is something that the executive team has worked on over the last week and a half. We are certainly very aware of council's motion from the special budget meeting 2 weeks ago, and what we presented to you tonight. I certainly don't want that to be seen as an act of defiance on my part by any stretch of the imagination, but we did come together in a collaborative manner as the executive team over the last week and a half after that meeting and looked at things from a holistic point of view, and we're trying to encompass the entire organization and how changes to the budget affect it from an operational point of view. Certainly, we do appreciate that the motion that was passed that directed the Director of Community Services to come back with $100,000 less in her budget. She has done that, and that is still available for discussion tonight, obviously, as part of Council's motion. In fact, it's $102,000 that she has identified, but we did think it was important and that it was our responsibility to provide council with an option. And that's what the treasurer is going to do tonight. But we certainly didn't want you, Your Worship, and council to think that we had just ignored that. That's certainly not the case. But the option that Krista is about to present is there, and certainly if council's wish is to maintain the directive from the budget meeting, certainly the Director of Community Services, Dana, will be able to address that as well, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. And Ms. Brandon, I'm going to go to you now, and you can go through the budget. Thank you.
Alrighty, everyone can hear me okay? I'll take that as a yes. So included in your council package was the updated 2024 budget package. So that is the document that has all of the detailed budget information in it. It's about 42 pages long. So that's the first part of what's been included in the budget. The next part is the tax rate tracking changes, so I want to run through that with everyone. So if that can be put on the screen, and that is the document that has the summary of tax changes. So the first item on the list from the budget meeting was the request to decrease the cost of the salt shed from $380,000 to $280,000, thereby impacting the tax rate by the $100,000. So that piece has been done and is included in this budget. The next line item that we changed was to adjust the reserve transfer from $466,532,000 to $100,000. That net impact is $366,532. That has been accounted for in the budget that's presented to you. The direction to cut the budget by $100,000 from the community services budget. That's what Erin was just discussing, and executive team met and looking at where we align with our strategic plan in our asset management and the budget that we have. You know, we did adjust the street capital by $100,000. Which impacted the tax rate, so decreased the tax rate there again as well. The next item was to adjust the general capital borrowing from the 2.5 million to 2.25. We have done that. That's included, you can see on the general capital budget, which starts on page 25 of your 42-page budget document. It has zero impact on the tax rate because, again, that's just strictly not related to an expense, but just strictly related to a source of funding. The next line item was, as I was looking through the budget, and in order to be able to finance some of the items and to do some of the reserve transfers, which I'll go into in a minute, I had to do an adjustment on some of the funding for our CCBF. So as I've previously indicated, our CCBF 5-year plan has been estimated based on our last year, so our 2023 amount of the 1.371 million. We've extrapolated that and estimated about $6.8 million over the 5 years. Originally, I had 2 years worth of funding in 2025 because at the time when we were preparing the budget, that's where those funds were more needed at that point in time. As we've gone through and made some of these adjustments to our reserve transfers and reduced the tax rate, I had to relook at the financing. So again, no impact to the tax rate, but what I've had to do is on the 2025 general capital funding piece, I had 2 years worth of CCBF funding into the budget. I've had to move one up to 2024. So for 2024, for our general capital, I will be pulling in $595,000 from our carry forward CCBF funding for our 2023, and I'll also be pulling in $400,000. Which is our first year of our next 5-year CCBF funding. So no impact to the tax rate, but again, just another source of funding. The next line item that we had to adjust for in the budget, if you remember back to our all-day budget session, there was discussion about to add the Hampton Road streetscape study of up to $150,000. There was discussion at that point in time. No source of funding was indicated for that line item, so I've had to add it into the 2024 budget, thereby increasing the tax rate slightly to account for that. But I understand that that was the intention of council, was to fund this streetscape study. And again, we will look for grant opportunities, as we always do, to maximize the amount of grants that are available to us. So we will be looking for that as well. Then in some of our kind of finance review and just fine tuning of the budget and just re-looking and double checking all of the numbers, there were the two studies that we talked about previously. So there was the active transportation study of $50,000 and the Ritchie Lake study for $30,000. So both of those two items have been budgeted in our 2023 budget. So being that these in essence are going to be carry forward amounts, we were not successful for the environmental trust fund application on the Ritchie Lake piece. So what we will be doing is again reapplying for that, adding this budget into 2024, but also bringing in some funding from 2023 to offset that. So what that meant is that we had these items on our 2024 general capital that was presented, and we didn't need to have that funding in there. We've already funded it. So I'm thereby reducing the tax rate again by the $80,000. The next item that came up in between now, or sorry, in between our budget meeting and last Friday when we submitted this budget was we were notified of a significant increase for the UMNB association dues. We had about $9,100 budgeted, but it's going to be around $15,400. So we've had to increase our budget by the $6,300 that's shown on the tax tracking sheet. Another piece of information that has come forward since our budget meeting is the Funday Regional Service Commission budget has had an adjustment. It looks like there's some more funding coming from the province that they were able to thereby then reduce our funding portion. So we have reduced the budget by the $63,864 as indicated on the tracking sheet. And then the last two items that we have changed since the all-day budget session were just some slight tweaking as we finalize our budgets and do a review and a final check with Rosse, who we share the fire and police costs with. So there was slight $486 adjustment on the police and as a savings, and a $535 increase on the fire expense portion. So all of those changes then net us to a revised tax rate of 1.2560, which is 0.0005 of a cent from where we ended at our all-day budget meeting, but it does then accompany and account for all of those changes. So again, that's a lot of information. I can pause here if you like, or I can continue on through to the reserves.
I don't see, whoops. I do see Councillor Bigger would like to make a comment or a question.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay, Ms. Brannon?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. Just on the Hampton Road streetscape study, we had said we would budget up to $150,000. Of course, that impacts the bottom line as you've got it presented here. But are we anticipating? I just can't immediately remember here. But are we anticipating that a positive response from our HAF application would cover this ultimately, and we would hope to recover that? Or had we just decided that this is irrespective of whatever happens? I mean, I know that we've decided irrespective of whatever happens, we will put the money aside and make it happen. But do you, as the treasurer, do you sort of hold out hope for that being an option as it, if HAF funds come back to us?
So what we've done here is, we were directed to, it's going to happen regardless of whether or not we get funding for it. Hence why it's in the budget at the full amount. It's still early in that housing accelerator funding piece, but that is absolutely our goal, is to look for either funding through that or other funding through other areas, potentially through the province or anywhere else where we could look for funding. So as always, that's our hope, but we budget for the whole thing so that if we do not get any grant funding, we have the funds to cover it off.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Deputy Mayor Scryer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Krista. I'm just curious about the housing assessment. I don't see anything in the budget for it, and I know that that was sort of it's in a strategic plan to look at housing, and that we were going to have Dillon Consulting come back with us with a price on what it would cost for an assessment to be done. I just worry with the housing accelerator, that's if we get the funding. So was there somewhere in the budget that it was, that I missed it? Or was it just not included in the budget?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Ms. Brandon?
Sure. I don't know if I completely understand the question, so maybe repeat it.
Or a housing assessment to be completed in 2024?
So I know that Dillon had kind of gone through and done that. I don't know if we've been successful in any of our applications or heard anything yet about that. I know that we did talk about the Hampton Roads streetscape and what that's going to look like, but everything that we have in the budget is in the budget as of this point in time.
Ms. Brandon, I'm going to go to Mr. Kennedy and then to Mr. Colburn, please, our acting CAO.
Sure.
Thank you, Your Worship. I didn't realize Mr. Colburn had hit his light as well, and I might scoop him or he might scoop me, but there is some funding for that within our municipal plan review and the zoning update that we're going to be undertaking in 2024. So the housing needs assessment is part of that, but certainly that's something else as well that we would identify as grant funding if we're successful with our Housing Accelerator Fund application, that would be able to be put toward that, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Colburn, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to build on Mr. Kennedy's comments, so as part of the HAF application, they had to do housing assessments as part of that process. So some of that work's already been done as part of that application process. So as been mentioned, there is funds within the municipal plan, zoning bylaw, so within the planning and development services portion, there is some funds in there. Dillon will be undertaking an interim review of the municipal plan and bringing forward a zoning bylaw revisions in 2024, and that will be based on that type of information. So that's all sort of a part and parcel of what's to come in 2024. So there is funding been allocated in the budget to cover that portion of the request.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Deputy Mayor Scryer.
Thank you. So it's embedded within another budget, so that's good news. I'm just wondering what happened to Dillon. I believe we put a motion forward, council put a motion forward for that to come back, and we haven't heard from them, so that would give us an idea of price anyway. They were to come back with some pricing for us, so we know what that is. So I'll leave that in the hands of Mr. Kennedy to see where that is. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Scryer. Any other questions at this point? Ms. Brandon, we'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So next, what I'm just going to kind of go through is just an update on our reserves. And so in our budget presentation package, we had a slide that says, how do we stack up? So if we could just go to the next page there quickly first. And so how do we stack up? So again, our municipality. So right now we are included in our budget package is a tax rate of 1.2650. And we have the comparison of where we stand against Edmundston, Riverview, Miramichi, and Dieppe. So what we wanted to do, just as we were looking at our reserves and looking at the balances in there, we wanted to just do a quick kind of comparison against those same municipalities. And we also added in Rothsay. So if you can go to the first page of that attachment there, the bar graph. So again, so how do we stack up as far as our reserve funds and what we have available to, to fund various things in the future and to also potentially use that money for some of the maintenance items that we'll have in the future. So when we look at the first section of the graph, there's the general operating. And so our general operating is, there's a maximum, there's a ceiling limit to that general operating reserve. That's why you don't see huge differences there, but we can have up to 5% of our prior year's operating expenses within that budget. So we haven't quite maxed that out, but we're close to that. So our general operating reserve is in a fairly good position. So when we look at the next part of that graph, which is our general capital reserve funds, you can see the first section there with the kind of like lines drawn through it, the small little section there, is where we're anticipating our reserves to be at the end of 2024. You can see in the solid blue, that's where our reserve funds were at the end of 2022 in comparison. Next, you'll have Rothsay, you'll have Edmundston, and then Riverview, Miramichi, and Dieppe are all within, sitting close to $15 million and over $20 million in those reserve funds. So when we stack up against those, we're really short on our reserve funds for future development, for future growth, to be nimble and to be reactive to various things and opportunities that do come up to us outside of the budget time and even during the budget time. So it really does limit us as a growing organization to have our reserves be quite small comparative to the size of our budget and the amount of our assets that we have. So what I wanted to just do now is just run through all of our reserve funds. This is the last page in that attachment there. So when we brought forward the budget, we had talked about some of what our reserve balances would be and what I had anticipated projecting to kind of go through and to be putting into reserve for our 2023 street capital. So the second column here, our general capital reserve. So all the opening balance, that's the balance that's been audited by our auditors. That's the end of our 2022 balance. The next is what we're estimating for interest. Then we have some budgeted contributions to add to our reserves before the end of the year. And then you'll notice here the line item transfers to be done in 2023, and it's $515,450. Originally, when we came to council, I had estimated that number at $1 million. And again, as we're going through the budget and everything is changing, we, sometimes don't have the full time to do a deep dive into everything that we would like to be able to do. So each point in time within the budget process, our finance team has taken things back, looked at it, and said, does that make sense? Are we, in alignment, and just making sure that all of our numbers are accurate. And what the difference was is I had the $1 million, but really I'm going to be able to transfer about $515,000 related to our 2023 street capital. And how we kind of come up to this number is when we look at our 2023 budget that was approved, we had $2,342,000 accounted for in our street capital work. Then what we've done is we said, well, we've got funding sources for this that are separate than our operating funding. So we had or $2.3 million in expenses, we said, well, okay, how are we going to fund this capital work? Well, we have our CCBF funding. So we had estimated at the point in time when we did the 2023 budget that we'd have about $661,000 of CCBF funding to apply against our 2023 street capital. Okay, so then I have to deduct that from the expense that we have. Then we said we're also going to be able to pull in $664,000 from our reserve to fund that. Well, I also have to take that source of funding off, because again, it's not tax-based funded, it's other sources of funding. Then we were going to be borrowing, or set up to be borrowing, $500,000 that was going to be applied against our 2023 street capital. So when I take the 2.3 million, I subtract 661,000 for CCBF, I subtract 664,000 that we were going to take from reserve but aren't, and then I subtract 500,000 for the borrowing that we're not, in essence, going to be doing against those expense amounts, and I'm left with $515,000. So in our 2023 budget, that's all the operating funding that we were going to be using towards street capital. We had $2.9 million funded from our operating budget, but of that 2.9, only 515,000 is related to street capital. So I'm saying at the most, that's how much I'm going to be able to put into reserve to add it in to offset it against our 2024 street capital. So when I do that, then I'm saying I'm going to have $2.755 million in the reserve at that point in time. But then we have some withdrawals that we've had to do. So one of the withdrawals is $385,000 for the Hammond River land purchase that will be coming forward here to be approved through council. I have to account for that because we need to take that money out to fund that expense in this year. And then we also have our carry forward projects that we had last year said, we can't finish this work. We need these funds for it because we are going to finish this work in 2023. So I need to pull in that money as well. So the sum of the 385 plus what I need for the carry forwards totals $561,000. So I have to subtract that from our balance. So I'm estimating as at December 31st, 2023, I'll have almost $2.2 million in that general capital reserve. When we look at what our 2024 transactions related to the general capital reserve, so we are going to be putting in $187,450. Of that, 100,000 of that is related to the motion that we talked about earlier about reducing our reserve transfers. The other part of this number is shown up on our external services portion of our budget because it relates to the borrowing that we're doing for the fire station. So the sum of those two pieces totals that 187,450 that we're going to be contributing to the reserve in 2024. But then we've also scheduled to take out 1.855 from the reserve to be able to fund our 2024 street capital. And that thereby leaves us with the $527,000 that we're projecting to have in our general capital reserve. If this budget is approved as it is, that is what we're projecting to end the balance at 2024. Our general operating reserve will be around the 1 million mark. We will have room to be able to put into that, but we aren't budgeting to add any money into our general operating reserve at all for 2024. But we are going to be taking out 135,000. Again, 80 of that relates to what I already talked about in regards to the Ritchie Lake and to the active transportation projects that were budgeted already in 2023 that we'll be completing in 2024, along with the $55,000 for the digital transformation roadmap survey that we're anticipating to do in order to move forward on a number of other IT-related items that we need to, as a town, to be able to move us forward. Our utility operating and our utility capital, so our utility capital, those will also be, the utility capital will be a fairly depleted reserve at that point in time. Again, we've been putting money in to complete carry forward projects, so really that's what that is all related to. And then our utility capital replacement, that's a restricted reserve, so we are mandated on how much we're supposed to put in, and we have to go through, and it needs to be specific items related to replacement and Forester's Cove that come out of that. So in that regard, that part of utility is restricted for us. And then we have estimated to have about 160,000 in our LPP reserve, which again isn't a significant amount of money to be able to purchase. Even, for example, the Hammond River, we wouldn't have had enough in land for public purchase to be able to facilitate that that full transfer either. So just an update of where we anticipate all of our reserves to be based on the budget as presented at this point in time. That's it for me at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brandon. And certainly this is such an important time of year, and I would like to remove myself from the seat, but I think I'll wait first and hear what others have to say. So if there's any comments or questions that anyone would like to ask at this point, I don't see any. Deputy Mayor Scryer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to the staff for everything you've done and for council working on this budget. I know I'm sort of late to the party, but I've been watching it closely, and there's a lot of things in this budget that I really like. And I think sometimes it's the small things that mean a lot. You know, when we look at things like we're putting down, Dana, what is the beach mats for inclusion? That's a big thing, you know. And I saw in Gary's we had some more street lighting. That's a big thing. Putting shade at the Qplex. That means a lot to people. So sometimes the small things get overlooked for the bigger projects, but I'm glad to see like that we are doing a housing strategy, and all those things add up to a lot when it comes to the residents. So I want to thank the staff for thinking about those things and thinking about inclusion and thinking about, you know, what is it that our residents really need besides transportation, roads. Everybody knows the roads are always on the top. And I guess so my big question is consideration, if the tax rate remained the same as what it is today, what would that do for our reserve fund? Could we use that money to go into reserve? Because I believe what I'm hearing from our treasurer is she's worried about our reserve funds and that we don't have the ability to make a move if so we need to. For instance, I'm thinking, what if there was a climate change episode where some of our roads were washed out and we had to rebuild up our roads? Do we have the capacity to do that? And that concerns me if we don't have anything in our reserve funds. Who knows what could happen, and I'm sure over the years there's been some great things happen that we've gone, oh, where we're going to get the money for this one. So I'm just wondering if the tax rate remained the same, and I believe it's $1.27 around that amount. What is that difference, and would council consider putting that money into reserve for future use? Just my thought of how we might be able to build up our reserve funds.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Scryer. Ms. Brandon, did you want to respond to any of that?
Sure, Your Worship. So right now, the budget that's presented in front of you is the 1.2560. Our 2023 rate tax rate was 1.2777. So the difference between those two amounts equates to $551,518. So we've reduced our tax rate by 2.17 cents. So that 500, if you're talking about leaving it at the 2023 and maintaining that rate, at this point in time, we would be able to take that $518,000 and put it into reserve, and that would then maintain the tax rate, if that was your question.
Thank you, Ms. Brandon. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you. I'll just follow up on that. You can keep it at 127. You'll also increase everybody's taxes, what they pay, by 10%. Because everybody's gone up a minimum 10%, because last year was 18, was capped at 10. This year, the average was 11.7, capped at 10. So you would put up everybody's tax, but they would pay 10% more in taxes. So I just wanted to follow up on that. So I have my own questions, but not on this. So I'll let everybody else go on Krista's stuff. I'm on the next note.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else at this point. Let's go to Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a question related to the slide on how we stack up the various municipalities listed here and their reserve funds that in their various accounts. And I just wonder what the relationship is, between the other municipalities listed here who, clearly have a higher level of reserves on tap currently, and the fact that those municipalities, the closest municipality to us, is currently 19 cents higher in their tax rate. And I just wonder what the relationship is between those more fulsome reserve funds in those other municipalities and their higher tax rates, which in some cases are almost 50 cents higher. In the Miramichi, you're pushing 50 cents difference there almost. So that was a question. That's just a sort of a very elementary accounting question I guess I have, but I thought this would be the right time to ask that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger.
So through your worship, so the relationship really is, again, these numbers came from their audited 2022 financial statements, so they're public information that's out there for anyone to look at, just as ours are online as well. So again, every council, every municipality has different ways of which they fund things, how they finance things, what they're putting into reserve, what their financial policies are. So everything is related and everything is relative. So, I don't know the in-depth of how they're funding that, but I do know that, they're population-wise, we have, some differences there, but these are the ones that are closest to us. If you have a higher tax rate with your assessment, you're able to put more into reserves. It's all related and it's all relative.
Follow-up question from Councillor Bigger.
Thank you very much. No, of course, that makes sense. And as you say, there's population variations here. And of course, like the motivation, the projects that are, capital projects in various different municipalities are going to be according to the long goals that they've set and whatnot. So of course it can't, but there does, I guess I just feel at some basic sort of seminal level, there's got to be some relationship between, and as you point out, these are public statements, but we're not privy to all of the ins and outs and ups and downs of what all these municipalities are up to and how they have funded their reserves historically. But I take the point, as the Deputy Mayor points out, that this update does give something of a sober review of what portends to be a fairly minimal contribution into our reserves as at December 31, 2024. And I take that seriously for sure. And I guess what I'm really asking is, I'm just asking council to, consider if there's a consideration here to be made regarding, as the deputy mayor has pointed out, maintaining our tax rate at the 2023 rate would equate to a significant amount. In my life, $500,000+ is significant still, at this point. I haven't broken through yet. And so I just can't help but wonder if there's some logic to that in terms of trying to fund reserves as opposed to, the other option would be to not spend as much, I guess. So there seems to be one or two ways you do it. You save more money, you make more money, you just, those are about it. Mary, am I right? Yeah. So anyway, thank you. I appreciate your feedback on that.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. And we will go to Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before I get into my list of spending less, I'll just make a comment on some of these reserves. So there's a couple things that you also have to take into consideration. I believe Riverview and Dieppe are saving money for their RCMP station. They were putting money in there, I think. I'm not 100% sure. I also know I've been here for 5, 9, 12 years, and in those 12 years, Riverview, because they play the game with the tax rate, they have got almost $30 million more from the province than the town of Quispamsis or Rossay combined has. So that's a bunch of stuff there. And so they play with their tax rate to keep it high, to make it look like they're not, but they shove it all into reserves, which is unacceptable in my manner, that they keep getting $2 and $3 million a year. So, and also I haven't looked this up in the last few years, so this may not be accurate, but about 4 years ago, I went through and looked at what the average resident in Riverview paid for their taxes, absolute taxes, not tax rate, versus Quispamsis. We were about $150 more per household than they were. So tax rate and assessments are very different. So, but that's you've heard me say, well, you haven't, you've only been here for 3 years,
No,
but everybody else has heard me say that for many years. So that was just my comment on that. So, and if I can go on to the spending cuts, I can, or if the mayor would wish to say something.
I think Councillor Olson wanted to say something on, are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just look at the tax rate of 127.7 for 23, and you take a look at all the others. And in the last 10 years, I think we've bounced around within 4 cents of that number. And with all due respect, I don't like tax increases or anything like that. But how do we expect to ever get in a water system or do any serious expansions with the population of and responsible for 18,768 people, maintaining that extra low tax rate? Now, I know everybody wants to maintain low tax rate, but on the other hand, we are often advised that Edmundston and up north is in a depressed area, because of business closings and all of that stuff. And they're at 163.5, population similar to ours, about 2,000 less. But how do these residents up there afford that difference in tax rate that we sort of take for granted here in Quispamsis? So I'm just I don't really have the answer to that. I'm just kind of making a comparison there. So anyway, I'm interested in listening to Councillor Miller's comments.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. Councillor Miller. Councillor Luck first, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to piggyback off what Councillor Olson said. And, I have heard a few comments around our strat plan. And, it does concern me in terms of our reserves and making sure that we have enough for when things that we don't plan for come up. But one of the things that I feel very strongly about, and I think that we really need over the next few years to, I guess, just again, to build off what Councillor Olson said in terms of, continuing to grow our town and have the money to do it, is the strat plan is a very visionary document that doesn't give a lot of detail. And what I would really like to see as a town is that we take the strat plan, which we had built, I think, 2 years ago now, and operationalize it. Because I think that that's one of the pieces that's missing, is that so far in my experience, again, very limited experience, budget planning is a bit of a surprise every year where we see where we're spending the money. And now that we have a strat plan, one of the things I think that we really need to do is operationalize it so that we can predict not all the things that we, again, surprises come up. But again, if we know that we have a strat plan for the next 5 or 7 years or however long it is, that we operationalize that so that we at least try our best to predict some of those things that are unpredictable so that perhaps we don't need to dig into our reserves as much because we plan for them, maybe not next year, but a few years out. So anyway, I just wanted to say that I guess you and I were both on a meeting as well as some of the town staff this week hosted by, I think it was you and B. Anyway, and it was very interesting because, a lot of the other municipalities, have a strat plan, but what they also have is kind of regular communication and kind of that strat plan being operationalized so that councillors are in the loop. And then also when we get into budget planning, it's, it's a little bit of an easier process because everyone's kind of on the same page and we've been planning off the operational plan and getting updates throughout the year. So there's no surprises. And I think if we did have that, perhaps the reserves wouldn't be as big of an issue. I think that we still need to have things for a rainy day. But at the same time, I think if we can operationalize our strat plan and have, very specific KPIs, it would help, the entire process moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. And the fact that we were on that virtual meeting with the government and with other municipalities around the province, it resonated with me as well. And having looked at the package over the weekend, I thought about the amount of money that we have in reserves. And of course, I've been talking with Ms. Brandon and Mr. Kennedy and realizing how important it is that we plan for the future. We planned the budget, and I'll remove myself from my seat, Councillor Olson, if you don't mind. We planned for this year, or for today, a year ago, and we need to have a vision looking out to the future. We are the 6th largest community in the province, and I just want to give a little bit of clarity to the responsibility that we have as council. We have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that our town continues to grow in a sustainable manner. Not only grow, but that we protect our town assets. To give an example of this, take the Quispamsis Memorial Arena. It was in a state of disrepair a few years ago, but the council of the day decided that they were going to invest in that arena, and we repaired it and extended its life and saved taxpayer dollars rather than building a brand new facility. And this came about as a result of our asset planning. The asset management plan is a plan that we adopted so staff and council could keep all town assets on their radar. That includes everything that is above the ground and everything below the ground that tax dollars pay for. This allows us to be prepared to make the appropriate repairs and replacements as required. Very much like looking after our home or our vehicles. We don't wait until things fall apart. By putting money aside, we are able to repair aging assets. The other plan that council approved of and hired consultants, MDB Insight, so that we would give guidance on how to move the town forward, is our strategic plan. This plan was designed to give council priorities and focus over the coming years. The strategic plan has 4 themes: infrastructure management, commitment to community, economic development, and capacity building. Within these themes are goals and objectives. The strategic plan, in my mind, is our North Star. In the past, we had no plan. We worked and did things on a basis of this needs to be done or that needs to be done, but never with a vision or a goal. We often put out fires and did a lot of small things to keep inching forward, but not always with a broader vision. We identified in 2019 that a strategic plan was a top priority during an internal audit review. The process was delayed in 2020 because of the delay in the municipal election that was bumped to 2021. Finally, the strategic plan was created and adopted by this council sitting at this table. And by adopting this plan, it demonstrates that each one of us agree to the principles and that we serve to move this town forward. When we consider the goals of our strategic plan, we must take to heart that when we adopt plans to ensure fiscal and operational soundness, it means we make decisions to provide the funding to make those decisions as well, to make them come to fruition. If we are to grow our town through our commitment to our community and capacity building, we need to direct staff to move in that direction. We need to give clear direction. Water expansion, for example, which we talked about in our last meeting on the Hampton Road, should be a priority, as identified in the themes identified to move Quispamsis forward. Our strategic plan directs council to optimize utilization of assets and infrastructure that contribute to being a community of choice. Council recognizes the importance of developing a responsible growth strategy, which incorporates climate change, considerations to improve physical infrastructure, and multimodal transportation. We also will look to implement strategies and methods that enhance citizen communication and engagement. We acknowledge in our objectives that we will continue to expand trails and active transportation options to improve connectivity. These are all embedded in our strategic plan. How can we continue to cut? This council agrees that we need to create an environment that encourages developers to increase the number of affordable and accessible housing units and the types that are available. In creating and in approving our strategic plan, it is council's responsibility to identify bylaws and policies that need to be created or reviewed to remain relevant, current, and are being effectively implemented. Not only did we agree to create an environment that encourages diversity of housing, we also want to create an environment that supports the attraction of commercial development. This council unanimously voted to approve our strategic plan. It is our responsibility not to put this on the shelf, but to look at our short-term and long-term goals as laid out and plan for the future of Quispamsis. A strategic plan requires action, and action will cost money. We need to be realistic. If we plan our work, which we did through our strategic plan, then we work our plan. This council needs to be prepared. There must be sufficient funds in our reserves. Reserves exist for a purpose. Quispamsis has been a community of choice. This is not the time to stall. We need to be united in moving our strategic plan forward. This council needs to be progressive in our thinking. Council handed off our strategic plan to our management team to get the work done that is laid out in the plan. It is council's responsibility to fulfill the mandates of the strategic plan. In a world of uncertainty, one thing is certain: we must plan for the future. We planned for today a year ago. We must plan for the coming year and years and have a vision and predict as best we can in preparation for many years to come. In this budget, all indications are that staff are fulfilling the themes of the strategic plan, and I believe this council should support the direction to ensure the continued growth, forward thinking, and future development of Quispamsis, allowing us to continue to be a community of choice. So that's what kept me awake last night. So I just wanted to express that we need to move forward, and as Councillor Luck said, we have a strategic plan. Let's implement it and let's continue moving forward. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, everybody. And I agree 100% of what you said. We need to continue with our strategic plan, and we also need to try to figure out a way to get reserves. So some of the things I'm going to ask to propose will actually not touch the strategic plan, but will actually help get us some money in reserves. And what I'm going to do is go through a list of items, if that's okay, or we can go around the horn, however we want to do it. I'm looking at some items that I think we'd asked originally $100,000 be cut from the Director of Community Services, and it was cut from the paving budget. So I'll get to the paving budget later, but I'll do a couple prefaces. The paving budget was at $200 a ton. The highest we ever paid is 133. We were asked 176. Last year, Classic Paving went out of business in St. John, which actually helped inflate all the prices around here. The latest paving was about 130, so I think budgeting at 200 when 176 was at that time seemed ridiculous. And we're seeing lower than that, and we're doing more. I think our paving budget is too high, but I'm going to get to that in a second. So I don't think we should take any money out of the paving budget because I thought our motion was, instead of going one by one, and Councillor Thompson was here, we never do it this way, and she voted against it, and so did Councillor Locke, so I'm going to go through a couple of them one by one and pick them out, and we can say yay or nay, and then I'll get into the paving budget after. Is that okay?
Are you asking us to make motions?
No, I want to make a couple motions because, and they can say yay or nay, because I didn't pick anything off, and let me do the first motion. I move that we do not accept staff's recommendations to take $100,000 from, that may solve a lot of these motions, or one of them. I make a motion that we do not accept the recommendation, instead of reducing community services by the $100,000, that we take it out of, that we don't take it out of paving. I can't even speak. I better put my glasses on, it'll help me.
So it's been moved by Councillor Locke, seconded by, Councillor
Councillor
Miller,
Miller.
seconded by Councillor Locke on the question. And I'm going to, Councillor Olson, remove myself from the chair again. So part of our mandate is to continue building our town. Part of our mandate is continue, and it's right in the strategic plan, trails and systems in order to make our town a community of choice. So based on that, the fact that it is a part of the strategic plan, I can't support that, but I will go.
Through you, Your Worship, just clarification on the motion.
The motion was not to accept staff's recommendation to take the $100,000 from paving. Glasses help.
To reduce the paving by $100,000.
Yep.
Not to accept that.
Not to accept the recommendation to reduce the paving by 100,000.
Correct. Deputy Mayor Schreier.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I just need some clarification from the treasurer. I thought I heard tonight that you had found the $100,000 within the community services. So that would make this motion, we don't need this motion if you've already found the $100,000 within the community services that you presented tonight. Is that correct?
Through Your Worship, to the Deputy Mayor, we, in this budget as it is presented, we took the $100,000 from the street capital number and not directly from the community services budget.
Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I don't reject the what's been put forward by the executive team out of hand. I do find myself somewhat in support of Councillor Miller's motion, but I'm curious to, and our acting CAO alluded to the sort of the chain of events that led to the kind of revision that we're being presented with tonight. But I'm a little curious just for a bit more detail as to what motivated that, I guess, and it's a, forgive my hubris here, but it's a little difficult for me to understand how council made and passed a motion and we're just being given a different solution instead tonight. And save only for Councillor Miller's motion to reject this, it would, assumedly go ahead. And as I say, I'm not entirely sure where I am on it. I appreciate the hard work to try to sharpen the pencils and et cetera. So I'm not dismissing the value of that. I'm a little interested in the the relationship between council and executive team in the process. And without wanting to step on any toes or offend anyone, I'm just curious as to how that was concluded.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. I will go to Acting CAO, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Bigger and the rest of council. We certainly don't take any offense to that question. It's a legitimate one, and it was one that I tried to preempt in my preamble before the treasurer presented the budget that's before you tonight, the revised budget. And basically, from my perspective, when we are preparing this budget and the department heads, they're not operating in silos. Everybody talks within this hallway more than once a day for sure. And we appreciated the motion from council, but we thought, in terms of the amount of time that went into the budget that was presented to council 2 weeks ago, and then we appreciate the challenge that Your Worship, you and council face in trying to absorb all of that information in a condensed period of time, that when that motion was passed that day, it didn't take long, within a day, that we sat down and said, are there other ways? And what we thought was council's ultimate goal during the end of day open discussion was to reduce the tax rate. So we took it upon ourselves to come up with another option for council's consideration tonight. And as I mentioned in my preamble, the Director of Community Services has done what she was directed to do, which is remove $100,000 from her budget. And if this motion from Councillor Miller passes, I suspect the next step would be for the director to advise Your Worship and council what she has removed from her budget to meet the mandate of that motion. So it wasn't, as I mentioned off the top, an act of overt defiance by any stretch of the imagination. It was, as an executive team, with the operational requirements, with the strategic plan, with what we feel is in the best interests of our residents, coming back with an alternative for council's consideration. And if council decides to maintain the directive from 2 weeks ago, we are certainly willing to accept that. That's council's prerogative. But we did think it was important, with all the work that had gone into the budget, to keep that process moving and spend some time over the last week and a half to put another option together. And part of that was in discussion with the Director of Engineering and Works in terms of the costs associated with the street capital campaign, and that $100,000, when it's broken down by the various streets, and I'm not going to put words into his mouth because he has lots of words and I suspect he's going to get an opportunity to speak soon. When you break it down on a per street basis, it's not a significant amount of money. It adds up to $100,000, but street by street, it's not insignificant, but it's not a tremendous amount. So I guess the answer to Councillor Bigger's question is we just thought it was prudent and it was our responsibility to offer council another alternative. But certainly we are very cognizant of the motion that was passed 2 weeks ago, and that's why the Director of Community Services prepared to honor that directive and respond to it tonight, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I'm going to go back to Councillor Bigger.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to our acting CAO. And I would say thank you to all the staff as well who went away with the proposed budget from our all-day meeting and worked to try to find an alternative means of getting that 100K out of the budget. And I certainly take no sort of umbrage to the effort being made. I think that what's been brought back is an alternative for us to consider. and I just take it as that. I appreciate that. I'm not entirely convinced still that it's the right thing, the right way forward. I'm not entirely sure I agree, although I agree with the spirit of what you say, that the budget department to department is not formulated in silos. I think that wish lists are somewhat, and I think that each department would be only serving their department to the best of their ability by coming forward with a reasonable but fulsome list of what they hope to accomplish, irrespective of what another department is up to. So I'm not entirely sure I get the logic of what you're saying there. But I certainly respect the effort being made, and I'm not eager to needlessly remove projects that are useful and beneficial to our community, as our mayor very well laid out in reference to our strategic plan, goals and values. We're eager to see a progressive community that continues to develop and evolve in that regard. So I guess I'll leave it at that, and we'll let the motion go forward. But I thank the acting CAO for his feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. On the question, Mr. Logier, your light was on. I'm sorry. I had to turn it off so we wouldn't get an echo.
Thanks, Your Worship. A few things for clarification purposes. With respect to the street capital program, if council will recall the presentation that was made and we were asked about what we were using for budget numbers, we looked at what the average tender prices were last year, $176 a ton. When we met with the contractors, and as recently as today, met with the contractors, asked what they were projecting for next year, they are telling us that your average prices are pretty good, and do not be afraid to think that you'll be seeing a 10 or 15% increase over those when you come to tenders. The Classic Construction hasn't bid a capital project in anywhere in the region for 4 years. So we had the three major bidders, NRB, Galbraith, and Dudley Construction, bid the project. So the lack of Classic Construction had no impact on the increase in the prices. The prices were based on fuel costs, manpower, the availability of work, the amount of work that was out there. So the contractors bid what they felt they had been owed for a number of years. When you talk to them directly, the prices that we were getting for them was not sustainable. 82, 75, anything under $100 a ton was not sustainable. You know, in their intent, they were giving us asphalt. So the bid last year, they felt reflected the costs associated with the cost of doing business for asphalt work. Had nothing to do with a lack of a bidder that hadn't been in the market for 4 years. So we took them to heart. We didn't take it lightly last year to recommend to council to not proceed with the projects, but we were looking at it from a budget perspective, and that we didn't have the ability to say, okay, we're going to absorb $1 million because we didn't have reserves of $1 million, and apparently going forward we may not be able to make that decision if it comes before us again. So that's the basis of the unit prices. The council meeting of the day when we presented, and I was asked, you know, is that fair to use that number, that $200, $210 range? Can we make it less? I said, okay, well, let's go back and look at it. And when we saw the projections that were being made for the rest of the budget day, to the acting CAO's comments, the executive team, and I use that word strongly, team, looked at the concepts that were being presented. We may not operate in a silo, but we operate under the same strategic plan, the same initiatives that we want to see. Council has long since said we're going to be a leader when it comes to environmental friendliness, climate change, things of that nature. And we have adopted that, so we felt it was wise to say, okay, yeah, we see value in having a charger in different locations in the town. Is it worth us to look at our street capital and say if we went from 210 to 203, drop $7 a ton, we would still be able to get all the streets done. It would drop some streets maybe $5,000, some of the bigger streets maybe $14,000, but over 13, 18 streets you can get $100,000, no problem at all. So we said, okay, we see the rationale of that from an engineering group. I presented it to our acting CAO and said, listen, if the goal is here to keep the tax rate, we have a way to manage this and still keep up with some of the core initiatives, some of the core strategic values, capacity building, greenhouse gas, things of that nature, and still follow those processes. So it was done with the full concept of being a team, being looking at the whole operations of the town, not being to say, all right, we're going to be the heroes and save the day. This is looking at the whole operations. So that was the concept that was made for there. When we look at the current day prices, the $130 a ton that was bid on a provincially subsidized project, it was done because they actually had an opportunity to be back in the area. But when we look at the unit prices that are being out there, they're still up in the $150, $160 a ton range, and more for handwork. So, going through the budget numbers again today with my staff, all the technical staff, all their dealings with the contractors, they were, they came up to me and they were adamant, that you cannot think that we're going to be getting that kind of numbers if we go down to the $130 a ton again. So, I've got to rely on what they've seen in the field, what they see out there, what they're working with. The benefit for us next year going forward is the fact that we've got a $5.5 million or larger street capital program. That's what's going to get us the benefit of value. We then become competitive with some of the larger communities. They are able to say, okay, we're going to be there and we're going to give us a better price. And that's what we're banking on by saying, okay, we stepped back, pushed everything forward. Now we are able to manage that project accordingly with a reasonable unit price. We are still in line, as I touched on at our presentation day, with our asset management plan. The work that we've done, the commitment that we've made, if council will recall, we had an estimate of about $2.5 to $2.7 million a year investment in our street capital program to keep the current street paving ratings as they were. So even stepping back by 1 year, we saw that we were still able to maintain those ratings. So by going back and getting a little bit more, we're confident that'll help us with our asset management plan and keep the ratings in place. So those are all the decisions that were made when it came to presenting the budget as proposed, but more so having the capacity to be a valuable contributor to the overall initiatives and the team component that we have with the town moving forward. That's the background that I've got for that process. I can't go through and say, okay, every single line item is justified. That's council's decision. If you want to go a line by line budget, that's your prerogative. If you go to a process where you say, we've got a strategic plan, we've got a concept, we've got an overall budget, we trust our professional staff to manage it appropriately, then so be it, and we can operate that way. Again, we will, as council, as the CEO said, we will work with the budget that's been allocated to us in the processes that we found. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background when it comes to the street capital program, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Loche. Councillor Donovan, please.
Thank you. I will say that as I was going through the agenda, I was a little surprised to see that $100,000 switch from one department to another. I respect that everyone has opinions on what is important. Some are right, some are wrong, but all are very valuable. When I went through the budget, not to say that certain things are more important than others, but they are. Last week or last month or whenever we had our budget meeting, I was fully prepared and was going to go line by line, starting with the Hammond River Park, and for me personally, ending with the the car charging ports or whatever it was going to be. And that would have been $100,000 right there. But I was convinced otherwise to allow community services to sort of pick their own, and that's what I was hoping that they would have chosen. But again, I went into budget time knowing and hearing from residents how important roads are, as they always are every single year when it comes to budgets. And I had come in with my mindset on spending as much money as we possibly were allowed to or could possibly feasibly do on roads, and $100,000 deduction from that as not alignable with what I had set my mind to. So I will say that I do support Councillor Miller's motion moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Donovan. Deputy Mayor Squire, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to clarify for myself, we stopped tenders for roads in August, or I can't remember, April, I think it was. So there, not all the budget was used, I think there was 500,000 left. So has that 500,000 been transferred to roads for 2024? Or is that 500,000 in the reserve fund? I just need clarification, because if that's an addition, or is that part of the road budget as it stands today? I'm not sure where that money went. That's what I'm asking.
Ms. Brandon.
Sure, through you, your worship. So we haven't done our year-end projections yet, but in December, we will be coming back to council with all of our year-end reserve transfers, of which will be the estimated $515,000 that I've indicated in my reserve presentation earlier this evening, that would be in 2023 sent from our operating fund into our general capital fund reserve, and then we would be removing that plus additional monies in 2024 from our reserve fund to fund our 2024 street capital. And I just have to step away for a few minutes.
On the question, it's been moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Luck, that council not accept the recommendation of staff to reduce the paving by $100,000. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried 4-2. The nay votes came from Councillor Bigger and Deputy Mayor Scryer. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. My next is going to be, they're going to be one at a time, but I'll explain them both at the same time. It has to do with the electric vehicle. So EVs, I know we talk about them, how good they are, et cetera. Us as a community, we don't get the same rebates as all the residents do. We're looking at buying, if you buy a hybrid or if you buy a regular vehicle, you're going to save about 10 grand. The cost for the electric charger is $52,000, which is more than some vehicles. So you take the $52,000 for having it down there for one vehicle. I know we have talked about other people's with vehicles, but that's another discussion I'm going to talk about, that public should not be allowed to use our things. Those should be for staff only. But I don't believe we need to have an electric vehicle. So if we go for, but I'm just explaining both. I'll do one motion at a time. I think we could do a hybrid and save $5,000 or $10,000. And I don't think we need, and I'll do that first, but my second motion will be about the electric chargers. So I move that we do not, and sorry, I'm picking at one because we asked for them to be done, and so I just want to get this over with, where we're at or where we're not at, and that's fine. I would make a motion that we do not buy an electric vehicle, but either a hybrid or a regular vehicle instead.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Miller. Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder to Councillor Miller's motion? Councillor Olson, are you seconding that? It's been seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question, Deputy Mayor Scryer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question on the process. It's my understanding that Ms. Dana Purton-Dixon has some suggestions of cost savings. And I'd hate to put all these motions forward and we're saying that this is what it should be, when I understand that she does have, has come back with the $100,000. So I feel that the process is backwards. I would like to hear what the Director of Community Service has to say about savings within her own department before we decide that we know what's best. So I would like to reverse the process if we could and stop for a moment and let's hear what the Director of Community Services. If
We can
that's-
call upon Ms. Dana Parton-Dixon, the Director of Community Services, to reply to your query.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to clarify that the vehicles we had in our department were not electric, so I don't know if that was known or not. But so I just wanted to make that point of clarification and then offer two suggestions to reduce our capital budget, and that would be for the EV charging station at 52,000, and then reduce the project for the Qplex grounds from 60,000 down to 10,000 and put that money in operating. So what we would do is, instead of the rubber surfacing for the dirt that you see there now that's well worn, we would sod that, and then instead of concrete, we would put quarter minus down. And where the rock was, we would remove that and put quarter minus down. That would be about $10,000. So instead of the 60, we would reduce that by 50, and then put that 10,000 into operating. So that would be 102,000.
Thank you for that explanation, Deputy Mayor Squire.
I'd be willing to put that forward as a motion.
There's a motion on the table
Oh, okay.
right now, so
The motion, actually, I guess.
just 1 second. Go ahead, Councillor Miller.
So when I saw, who's the electric car for? I saw it on the, was that? I thought there was an electric vehicle on there. It was 52,000, it was 50-some thousand for an electric vehicle.
For the charging station.
No, 50, but there was 57 for an
Okay,
electric
I'm going to
vehicle.
go to the Director of Engineering, please, so he can give the figures for that.
Your worship, in the fleet budget, the only vehicle that would have some electric capacity was for the planning department. It's currently a hybrid. It would be proposing a plug-in hybrid. So we have no fully electric vehicles proposed anywhere in the fleet. We do have that as an examination for the future as electric technology improves for half tons, things of that nature. But the current budget didn't have any fully electric vehicles proposed. They were all hybrids.
That. I'll remove that. It just said electric here on our list. Yeah. Okay. Then I'll let Deputy Mayor move the move.
Just 1 second.
I withdrew mine.
Councillor Miller, you withdrew your motion, and is that okay with the seconder? Okay. And Ms. Brandon, did you want to speak to any of this?
Through your worship, no, I just wanted to note that it was a planning vehicle. It was not a community services vehicle that was being proposed to be either electric or hybrid.
Thank you for the clarity. Deputy Mayor Squire.
Yes, Your Worship, I would move that council consider removing the charging stations from the budget in community service, as well as the new proposed price of 10,000 for the grounds for the Qplex, for a total of 102,000.
It has been moved by Deputy Mayor Squire. It has been seconded by Councillor Miller. On the question, please vote now. 1 second, please. The seconder was Councillor Miller. The charging station was 52,000 and 50,000 from the ground repair at Qplex. On the question, Councillor Donovan.
Thank you. You might have explained it earlier, but can you please explain through you to the Director of Community Services the 60,000 reduction or whatever it was for the Qplex? Can you explain what that was again?
Sure, through your worship, there was a project identified in the capital budget, and it was $60,000 for the grounds outside the Qplex at the Y entrance where the playground is. I showed pictures of where there was no grass, and we were going to put rubber surfacing there, remove all the rocks that were a hazard. They were being thrown into the pool area and on the trails. And then, so we were going to put concrete in there. So that's the project that I'm speaking about, that we would reduce that project to $10,000 and put that money in operating to and modify it. So it's quarter minus instead of concrete, and instead of rubber surfacing, it'll be sod.
Thank you, Ms. Parton-Dixon. On the question, it's been moved by Deputy Mayor Scryer, seconded by Councillor Miller. Please vote now. Councillor Luck. Motion carried 6-0. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll leave the rest since we're some other people may want to do some stuff, but I'll leave that alone. I have a couple of questions. I know, Mr. Logier, you were saying that, I know Classic didn't do the big bids, but they also did work in St. John. I'm just saying what somebody told me, so somebody had to take over whatever work they did. They were pretty big, but regardless, right now we have $200 a ton. If we look at reducing it to 180, we save about, we don't save, but you can take $330,000 off the budget. You can take it, add it to your reserve. If you go down to $160 a ton, you could take about $660,000 off. I'm not a big fan on cutting any asphalt because I'd rather see the whole Millennium done all at one time. So I just question, and I appreciate your comments and conversations. $200 a ton, I think, that's just me, looks high. So that was my thought of reducing the actual budgeted amount, throw that into reserve, and or reduce the amount of reserve we're taking out, and then if we do need it, we bring it back. So, or is it better to keep it at the total dollar number of 3.4 million, but see what we can get for that whole street of Millennium? And I'm just saying Millennium because it's our busiest street, get it done and over, and it may be cheaper to do it all at once. So just comments if you could, please.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. We'll go to Director Logier.
Your Worship, if we remember a few years ago when we had projects that came in under budget, we had the flexibility then to add streets. And that's my main hesitation about dropping a unit price, because now if something comes in, you don't have that flexibility to add streets. With respect to choosing which streets should be done, Millennium, the next phase of Millennium takes us up to Market Street, which is a combination of street work, active transportation, trail network, and we don't have a design for the rest of Millennium yet to give us a full feel of what it would cost. What we had intended this year, because we have full designs for the Means Cove Road, the bottom of the Pettengill, some of the streets, we had the capacity to be able to go in and say, if we're going to extend the length of a street, we have some in our pocket to do that. In addition, to spread the paving budget around, so to speak, we also have quite a few local streets that are in need of resurfacing. If we just go to our pavement rating program, that we could slip in without any staff design time to speak of. So the rationale for choosing the streets that we did was that we could fix a design, see how Millennium, how it worked, and then expand on that to blend in with our AT. But we also had enough in our pocket to say, okay, now we have that capacity to build. I'm still not comfortable thinking that we should go to a budget with a lower unit price. From even our average, as I said, was $176 a ton. When they're telling us 10-15%, now you're up into that $200 range. And I'd much rather be prepared to come back and look like we have some money to invest as opposed to come back, look for more that would be in a reserve. If it weren't there, we'd have to go back to the reserve and say, well, we just to do the streets we had, we've got to go to the reserve that we just put in at the time of budget. So it's a sort of an in and out that we wouldn't really want to process. So that's the rationale for using the pricing that we did when it comes to street capital programs. It's got nothing to do with padding a budget, trying to make it look good. It's all about, okay, what is the easiest way to ensure that we can get all the streets done that council has identified as priorities, and if it comes in at a favorable price, then we can add on to it. So this is the whole process that we use.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Logier. I guess I have a question on, because I know in the past when we've added on or we've taken away, does it cost us extra fees to, like a handling fee to add on? I'm kind of asking for a couple reasons. One, if we do think this is robust, and I'm okay, at the end, I would rather spend, this is me personally, I'd rather spend the $5.8 million and get as many streets done as possible. Because, but is it better to add a little bit more in those streets? You know, you can go keep your budget the same, but you said you maybe had 100,000 potential when we talked earlier. Is just add some of the streets a little bit longer, because would you get a slightly better bid from the contractors? If Millennial's out of scope because we don't have the plans, perfect. But some of the other ones that we add on an extra 0.3 kilometers on something just to in the same area, because maybe the bid gets just, it wouldn't be a huge amount better, but a little bit better to get it all. Just a question.
When it comes to, usually with tender prices for street capital, where we get into, I'll say trouble, is when we drop or increase or drop the scope of work more than 25%. And on a $5 million budget, you're talking, $1.25 million. So I think we're still in that, the bigger projects give us that much more capacity. If you recall, when we had smaller projects and we said, okay, we can't change it because it's 25% of the project is $80,000, then we're sort of behind the eight ball. But with a larger project, the 25% gives us a little bit more scope to work with, either to add to or deduct from the value of the project, so we don't incur any extra costs or fees. And generally, the contractors will honor their unit prices if we exceed a certain amount, or most of the time it's if you go below a certain amount, they penalize you. Yeah, and they'll penalize you if you go below it. Generally, if they have capacity and if they have the ability to do it, and they can keep their crews in the same area and make the same amount of money, they're usually not too bad about it. So that's why we've come to council in the past and said, okay, this is the time to take advantage of a higher or low unit prices, because we can add to the contract and they're still in the area. So for us, at this value of a project, I do not see a 25% change as being really significant one way or the other. And to be fair, the 210 dropping it by $5 to get the $100,000, we still were able to get all of the streets. We weren't cutting any streets or any lengths of streets out with that adjustments. So we're comfortable with where we sat with it.
Thank you, Mr. Logier.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not going to ask any cuts in the streets as long as all the money stays in the streets. I guess that's going to. Oh, sorry, I'll stop it. I have a couple other ones.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I have a couple of people here wanting to ask questions. Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you to the Director of Engineering and Works for that insight about the projected sort of asphalt budget. I am heartened at the thought that we could come in under budget and then, as he points out, have the capacity to add streets to our plan. And I think that many people have said, let's get as many streets paved as we can. And I certainly would say here to that. But I'm just looking through the budget presentation and I don't see any reference to that figure having been arrived at on the basis of that hope. And I guess I would just make a suggestion that be worked into future budgets where that's a consideration, because that information is helpful for me at this point sitting here tonight to understand the valuation that we've projected on, or the cost we've projected on to the budget related to asphalt purchases. I absolutely hope that that's the case and that we can get it as cheap as possible, do as many streets as possible. But I'm not entirely sure that was projected when this was presented to us. And so I would just make that suggestion. But again, thank you for being attentive to that. And I'm sure we'll be able to, I sure hope anyway, we can expand on the streets we have planned to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Mr. Loge, please.
And for clarification, the part about hope in the presentation, like hoping it came under type of, okay. I understand.
Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Drink of water.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I actually concur with what's been said in terms of getting, as many streets paved as possible, and, hopefully we'll come in under budget and we'll be able to pave more. But similar to the mayor, the strat plan's been keeping her up. Honestly, what's been keeping me up is paving. And the reason for that is we heard very loud and clear from our residents when we did our transportation master plan, when we did a recreation plan, that active transportation was something that was very, very important to our residents. And I went back and looked at the transportation master plan that was presented to us in May 2023 in regards to Means Cove Road. And in that master transportation plan that we spent quite a lot of money getting the consultants to come in and look at our roads and give us recommendations, they recommended for the entire Means Cove Road to be bike accessible shoulders. And what bike accessible shoulders are is basically bike lanes for rural environments that can be 1.8 to 3 meters wide. And basically they differ from a bike lane because people can also walk on them. So they're great for rural because we don't have sidewalks. And I know in the budget planning, we alluded to doing some type of trail on one side of the road. And I guess to me, in terms of being comfortable with approving a budget, I'm thrilled that we're putting a lot of money into roads because our roads definitely need to be improved. But I guess I'm asking this from more of a governance perspective, is that my understanding, based on this transportation master plan that we spent a lot of money on, is when I'm making these, if I'm voting for or against in terms of paving, that the quality of the paving to support our strat plan in terms of active transportation will be close to what this plan suggests. And I guess my question is if we're deterring from what the transportation master plan recommends, when does council become privy to that in terms of other options versus after the fact? I want to make sure that, again, as we have a strat plan and we're moving our town forward, we know that active transportation, it's great for the climate, we're going to need this in the future. So I just want to make sure that before we start ripping up roads and paving and then looking back going, oh, that wasn't quite what we expected, I'd like to know how, as council, we are informed to make sure that what we're voting on, thinking what we're getting is actually what we're getting. And if we're not, because something has changed, when do options come back to us as council so we're aware of what we're actually voting on? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Locke. I'm going to go to the Director of Engineering, Mr. Loge.
Thank you, Your Worship. Normally what staff has done in the past is we will identify the scope of the work style that's going to be undertaken on a street capital program. With respect to the Means Cove Road, the change that we made was we're taking 2 bike lanes on either side and essentially bringing them both to one side with a delineated line with the rumble strips and the paved shoulder width that has the ability to accommodate traffic, pedestrian, bike, rollerblades, whatever, in 2 directions. The transportation master plan identifies those, but if you look at the master plan as well, it also has conditions that or statements that where conditions permit, and some of the rural roads, the conditions do not continue to permit bike lanes on both sides of the streets, and we had to look at it and still meet the intent of the AT document and the transportation master plan, that we're looking at paved rural shoulders wide enough to accommodate bike lanes, and where the traffic volumes permit, if need be, have traffic, AT traffic in two directions. So by switching everything to one side, we can keep that in place, take advantage of the street conditions and ditch and shoulder conditions that are there, and still meet the intent of the Transportation Master Plan. But overall, for example, as we just talked about Millennium Drive, we'll be coming back to council with design to say, okay, this is what we're going to continue on. Is a separate delineated path, so you'll be aware of that. When the time comes for us to upgrade existing streets like the Hampton Road, that's part of the process by doing this streetscape plan to say, okay, we're going to take the Hampton Road, we're going to be incorporating all the infrastructure, water, storm sewer, but now we'll look at how do we incorporate bike lanes to meet the intent of the Transportation Master Plan. That may involve us relocating a curb and gutter or a sidewalk, so council will be involved in that type of a process. So all along, any significant streetscape is intended to be in accordance with the Transportation Master Plan. At the time of budget, council will be advised of the style that we'll be undertaking, and if there's a significant change that would take us away from the intent of a Transportation Master Plan, they would be advised at that time as well. Using the current budget as an example, we still meet the intent of our Transportation Master Plan with all our streetscape programs that we're undertaking this year, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Loge. Councillor Luck again, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm still trying to understand, because thank you, Mr. Loge, based on what you've commented on, is that we're going to basically put two bike lanes on one side. So we have the space, but we're going to put them on one side. And one of the things in the Master Transportation Plan is that they specifically said they were sticking to 4 types of bike facilities because it would decrease confusion by users and enhance consistency throughout the network. So again, you're the engineer, I'm the cyclist, and again, I speak to a lot of residents that are very passionate about active transportation. And again, I go back to the Transportation Master Plan, and I'm just really concerned about a plan that has bike accessible shoulders to a certain point, and then forcing all the bike traffic for a section of a road onto one side. Especially in the Master Transportation Plan, they also said that we live in a valley, so basically the priority would also be hilly streets, which should take priority in terms of safety. So I guess, again, I'm not questioning your expertise, but similar to the Gondola Point Road or Hampton Road, when decisions like that are made, they seem like they come back to council with different options in terms of what would be best, and then council looks at the different suggestions and decides. And I guess I just feel like within this situation, it's been decided that it's too expensive to do it the way that is stated in the Transportation Master Plan, and we're going to do it this way. And I guess I'm just wondering where council's role is in terms of governance to make sure, I guess, being stewards of the town, and just looking ahead in terms of, eventually down the road having a beautiful connected active transportation plan that is part of our strat plan, where our role comes in terms of being involved in those kinds of decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. We'll go back to Mr. Loge.
The intent of the Transportation Master Plan is to ensure that the network is sustainable in the community, and it's affordable and it's safe, which we take with all of the designs that we undertake for the town. Even as suggested, that bringing the street width to incorporate 2 bike lanes on one side. In this particular location, if you continue down that particular roadway, the curves and the hills and accommodate the streetscape without going up onto private property and increasing some of the damages appropriately. Even the section that we had proposed in doing the initial layouts, town staff was I'll say nicely approached by residents with significant objections to the designs that we had laid out as a preliminary. So we looked at it and said, okay, we can still meet the intent of the Transportation Master Plan with bike lanes that had delineated on one side. We look at the volume of users that are there, and they should be able to accommodate it, no problem at all. It's easier to maintain, and we felt that the process as being was followed. Again, I'll reiterate, all design projects ultimately come before council at the initial stages during budget. If there's a deviation in those, the council will be given the reasons and the processes and the rationale behind. I feel that the questions that have been brought forward about Means Cove Road have been properly answered, and the rationale is there and still meets the intent of the Transportation Master Plan. When we look at the document, as I mentioned earlier, there are more than enough statements that say, where conditions permit, where budget permits, where traffic volumes permit, where AT volumes permit. So we have to look at each site specifically and say, okay, what can we reasonably expect to see in the near future and the long-term future as a viable and reasonable method of incorporating AT into our street network? And that's the design processes that staff has been following to date, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Loge. Councillor Miller, did you have a motion on the table?
No.
No?
I had a couple more just questions, but I didn't have a motion. You said there's other people, so there's still more lights on?
There are no more lights on.
Okay. No one's home. I just had a question through your worship to Director of Engineering. I see curb and gutter in here, which is great. There's about 300,000, but I do have a question, and my question, I'll preface it. I used to travel a lot. I don't anymore. You travel more than I do. But I was seeing all the new areas coming, and even what I see down in Ross and what I see in St. John, there's no gutter. It's just curb. They're paving all the way to the edge. And I've been told by people, I'm not a runner, you can tell, or a cyclist, but people say that it's much safer for them with that. So I guess my question is, do we just do curb versus curb and gutter? And that's to yourself.
Mr. Loge.
Thank you, Your Worship. The titling or the labeling on the budget is somewhat of a misnomer when we say curb and gutter. You're correct in that a lot of the changes that are being made into our designs will have monolithic curb only, and the asphalt will actually go right to that face. The only place that will actually include gutter is if there's an existing profile that has gutter and that we've got a transition. But anything new that has designated AT components that require us to eliminate the gutter, we'll be designing that accordingly. But it's just the way it's labeled in the budget. It's curb and gutter just to represent that unit of item, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, please.
Sorry, this is my last one, I promise. I have a question. After looking through the budget and looking at our utility, I see that our costs are up about 9.7%, I think, something like that. We had discussion in the Finance Committee, and then we brought out the proposal to only go up 3%. And there was an option there of a 3.93, which doesn't sound like much, but when I look at the next few years, potentially with all the funding that we're doing in utility, I think at one point we projected we could have rates up as high as $700 when I looked at some of the increases. So I just didn't know if there's any appetite to change that from a 3% to a 3.93%, which still is significantly less than what we're doing in our cost of operation. It's still below 4%. And nobody likes paying more money, but even if we keep the tax rate as is, everybody's going to pay 7% more on that. So I would make a motion that we change the budget on the utility rate from 3% to 3.93%, if people are inclined.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor Luck. On the question. Councillor Luck, please. Okay, thank you. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried 5-0. I just want to acknowledge that our sixth counselor had to leave, so Deputy Mayor Schreier is not here to vote. That motion was carried 5-0. Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Worship. I just have a question for the Director of Community Services. In the budget, I didn't see, so it might be in the plans and it's just not in an item line, is back in May of 2022, Council did pass a motion to accept the recommendations of the Active Transportation Committee, and one of those recommendations was develop a town education program, public review committee, partnership with other active transportation educational programs. And I'm just wondering if we put any money aside for that, or if there's any plans in 2024 to be doing anything like that.
Thank you. Ms. Burton-Dixon, Director of Community Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. From our Active Transportation Committee, we still meet monthly. We have a summer student, well, it's actually working out of the Qplex for the program director. So that position is also working community events, but they are still going into the schools and doing presentations. They go to community events and promote active transportation. So we estimate that we easily reach over 1,000 young people every year with that coordinator position. So we still are continuing on that, our work in that area.
Thank you, Ms. Burton-Dixon. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Worship. My question is actually for our treasurer. Her and I were speaking earlier this morning, but I wanted to ask this in open so everybody else can hear. I just want to know the status on the information for our formerly known as gas tax, because the province wants our budget in by next week. We're going to vote potentially on it 2 weeks from now, yet we're estimating what our formerly known as gas tax will be. So if the gas tax is higher than we anticipate, then we all can make the decision on, would you like to put more of that into reserves or whatever. In theory, it should be significantly higher, but we don't know. It should be higher at some point. So I would just want to ask Ms. Brandon if she's got any new information or expectations on when we'll hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Ms. Brandon, please.
Through your worship. So yes, we have an estimate in our budget based on our 2023 allocation. So what I've done is I've taken that $1.371 million, extrapolated it over 5 years, and estimated that we would have about $6.8 million. We do not have any confirmation yet from the province on what our next 5-year CCBF funding will be. When we do get that information, one of the requirements is that we and our council approves a plan, a 5-year funding plan and a 5-year expenditure plan that will come to council based on the allocation that we have, the analysis that I've given you previously on saying that we are going to be putting about 70% of those funds towards our utility fund and putting 30% of those dollars towards our general fund. So again, we'll be coming back to council once we get that allocation with a plan that will need to be adopted by council. And then what we will do is we have placeholders in our 2024 for that anticipated funding. We also have them placeholders in 25, 26, 27, and 28. When we do get that information, we have all of those final numbers, we do our plan, then all of our 5-year plans will be adjusted accordingly. And, again, as we have in the last plan, we had 2 top-up allocations, so there's always potential for that as well. But we absolutely will be coming back to council when we get that information and creating a plan and then adjusting all of our records going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Brandon. Councillor Luck, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one other quick question. I asked it earlier, but Mr. Logier wasn't in the room, so I just wanted to confirm for this particular budget that the road from Cobblestone to Fuller is going to be bike accessible shoulders as per the transportation master plan, and it's not until 2025 that he's proposing the one-sided trail.
Thank you. I will go to Mr. Logier.
So this year's street capital, we, at Cobblestone, we will bring everything to the one side and continue the full length of the street with the double, the wider bike lane on that Cobblestone side, I guess you would say, rather than the riverside, for the remainder of the street itself. So we're not gonna go back and forth and back and forth. It'll be, we transition to this, we're gonna continue this for the full length of the street. So it'll be bike lane with accessible shoulder and then a gravel shoulder. So it'll be 1.5, 3 point, probably almost 8 meters wide.
So from Cobblestone in this year's
From
budget.
Cobblestone, we've got the double bike lanes now. Cobblestone, when we hit Cobblestone, we'll bring it over to one side. On the Cobblestone side, we'll have the bike lanes, delineated bike lanes, divided with the rumble strip with an accessible shoulder for the remainder of that street. So we're not going to go 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. It'll be everything will be brought to one side of the street for the rest of the street network. That particular street. Does that make that?
Well, I understand. I don't think it makes sense, but I understand. So I guess one thing I'm still trying to get my head around is if we have space to put a wider shoulder on one side, why wouldn't we put bike accessible shoulders? Again, not a bike lane, because I know the bike lanes are specifically just for bikes and they're a bit wider, but why wouldn't we do bike accessible shoulders on both sides?
Because it's more than just the width of whatever you're putting on the surface. It's the back slope, the ditches, and going onto the private property to get. So if you start looking at the dimensions of the street profile, the streetscape, as you get into once you get past the road width itself and whatever we have for bike lanes or bike shoulders or whatever we want to call them, once we get into the ditches, now we have to make sure that the ditches are designed with a proper slope away, and then from the bottom of the ditches back graded out to the property owners. So what we're finding is that as we get tighter into the street, because of the street, as you know, one side falls away, there's no ditch on one side, but on the other side, all the houses, their trees and their yards are crowed straight over to that side. By putting something on both sides, now we're expanding on both sides of the street. So we're impinging on two sides of the properties where we can adjust the center line of the road, have appropriate shoulder on one side, maintain that, and then we have the ability to play with the width on one side only and maintain that width all the way along without infringing on, too much on people's properties, the back slope, their lawns, removing trees, things of that nature. We would be removing trees all along that are in our right of way, but not a lot of people would like to see anything removed. It's their property, their vision, their visibility, and as soon as we start hauling trees and adjust a lawn slope, even though it's within our municipal right of way, they take a great umbrance to do any work like that. So we've been trying. We looked at the street width with what we're proposing. It narrows it down a little bit, but it gives us the ability now to adjust that within the center of the right of way, so that we can minimize the side impacts to adjacent properties as well, and still maintain the intent of the Transportation Master Plan, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Logier. Was there a motion on the table? No. Okay. Councillor Miller, are you finished with your questions or comments? No, I didn't know. You're finished? Okay. So we will move on to item 11. Oh, okay. Ms. Brandon, there was a question from Councillor Olson asking if you have updated the tax rate at this point with the changes that have gone through council this evening.
Through your worship, I have had to step away a few times, so if you'll bear with me, I'll just kind of run through the changes that I have captured. So the first change would be to not accept the recommendation to reduce the street capital. So in essence, we're putting back that $100,000 that we did take out of the street capital. Then there was a motion that we would be reducing the community services capital budget by eliminating the charging station and reducing the YMCA Qplex project from 60,000 to 10,000, and then moving this 10,000 into our operating. So that would have an impact of $102,000. Then we have the motion for the sewer rate, which does not impact the taxometer at all. Are those the two motions as being presented tonight?
All right, and the bottom line was that,
And then, so then the change would take it from 1.2560, where we started the night, to 12559. So a net further reduction of $2,000.
how many hundred? What was the amount of money?
$2,000.
Okay, thank you.
So 12559.
12559, yes.
12559.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor, oh,
The treasurer will then prepare this for the next meeting for final approval, right?
so this will go for the November 21st meeting for final approval. Counselor Bigger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before she had to leave, the deputy mayor had previously made a suggestion or alluded to the idea of what if the tax rate was to remain the same as our 2023 rate. And I'm more than a little intrigued by that concept, especially as it pertains to the potential for contributing to reserves, which seems to be a theme of the night. So I don't know if I should make a motion along that line now for us to vote up or down as Ms. Brandon goes away to prepare her final documents for us to come back and ratify. What would your preference be?
It would be time now.
Okay, well, I move that we retain our 2023 tax rate with no change at 1.2777 for 2024, just as it is in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved by Counselor Bigger, seconded by, your light was on earlier. Are you moving this? Moved by Counselor Bigger, seconded by Counselor Donovan.
Oh, yeah. Perhaps I should modify that. Counselor Luck just made a good point that perhaps I should stipulate that this is with an eye on contribution to reserves in an effort to bolster our reserves.
Thank you. On the question, Counselor Miller.
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. I'll be voting against this for a simple reason. Ignore the tax rate. You've increased everybody's taxes by 10%. So you've increased, because everybody's assessed. Well, yes, you will. So if you vote for this, you're increasing everybody's taxes by 10% versus what they pay now. When everybody's complaining about buying groceries, paying their heating bills that are going up 4 or 5%, buying groceries, going everything else, we fought over a 3 or 3.93% increase on sewage, which is $519. You're now talking about people that pay $3,000 are going to pay $3,300. People that paid $6,000 are going to pay $6,600. So we don't control the assessments. We technically don't control the tax rate. The only thing we can control is our budget. Our budget divided by our assessments equal the tax rates. We talked about Edmonton having a very high tax rate. My in-laws have a house for sale there, 4 bedrooms, double lot, brick, everything else, $260,000. It backs onto a provincial park. Don't have that here. You're not gonna, you'll 260, you're gonna get a lot. So I will vote against the motion because even by dropping it 2.5 cents, we're still increasing the tax rate to tax a person pays by about 7.5%. So I'll be voting no. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor Miller. Counselor Donovan, please.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification. If we were to leave it the same, I believe I heard earlier would give us an extra $500,000. Is that correct?
Councillor Luck, please.
I'm just wondering, in terms of, I guess, in light of what Councillor Miller has said, and maybe this is a plan and I missed it, so I apologize, but could we kind of have, because I know that we still have a few kind of outliers that we don't have the numbers for, so it's really hard to kind of, say we're happy with the budget until we know. Like, could we see both numbers where, or at least know that, if we kept it the same, we'd have about $500,000 to put in reserve. But then, I guess this has been a very challenging year for people with so many additional expenses and, again, even just food insecurity, et cetera. But again, there's still some unknowns, so it's really hard to look at what our reserves would be. So until I can see a number of what our reserves would be with some of those numbers that we still don't know, it's a real hard decision to make. So I'm not sure if we could, again, I'm hoping we're not voting tonight, but I'd like to maybe see both options with as much additional detail as possible before we have, are kind of made to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Luck. Councillor Bigger, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good point by Councillor Luck. I'm not eager to put needless work on our very apt and busy treasurer, but if building something of a comparative model that we could look at 2 weeks from now, if that would be better, I would be certainly glad to withdraw the motion for the time being and defer to that process. I think there's a lot of logic in what Councillor Miller has said about the absence of, clarity on the CCBF funds, and to Councillor Luck's point about having the best information available. So that's fine. I'm glad to withdraw that for the time being, but I'm eager to see the comparison as well. So.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. So you are withdrawing the motion to retain the 2023 tax rate, and the seconder approves of that as well. All right. So now we will move on to new business. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Brandon, I should have looked up. Go ahead, please.
Through your worship. So I'm not sure exactly now what I'd be comparing. So if we did maintain the tax rate, we would be adding about $550,000 to our budget, which then we would transfer to reserve. The comparison is if we leave the tax rate at the reduced rate that it is, we wouldn't be putting that money into reserve.
That's correct. And the follow-up to that is that they wanted a comparison when and if the funding comes forward, CCBF comes forward.
Okay, and so I guess I just don't anticipate us having that number before this budget comes back to council. But as I have indicated, I do have a placeholder in the budget, and this money is over 5 years. So whatever that allocation is, we've got some money accounted for it in the 2024 budget. If it's more, if it's less, it would be adjusted in those future years.
Thank you. You okay?
She probably wants direction as to, so it just goes with the 1.25, because she has to prepare.
So in preparation for the current budget, we've agreed to use the 1.255, correct? Sorry. 1.2559, yes. Okay, so as long as we're clear on that. Item number 11 is new business. There is none. Pardon me? There was no motion. Is there a motion?
Well, there was a proposed motion, there is a proposed motion that directed town treasurer to finalize the proposed 24 based on the revised tax rate of 1.2560 and or any revisions that council may have made that, so she has direction to come back for the next meeting with the final budget for council's final approval. So
is that a given, or do we have to vote on that?
well, council made it clear now that that is a given, so.
Okay.
I guess that's council's consensus.
So you
can ask the treasurer, I think she's clear on what you're looking for at this point, so.
Ms. Brandon, do you need any further clarity or a motion? Would you like a motion forward so that you know the direction
Your
from
worship,
council?
yes, I would prefer a motion with the tax rate of the 1.2559.
What was it, 2559?
1.2559. It's been moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question, please vote now. Moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Olson. Councillor Miller, waiting on your vote. Motion carried 5-0. Going to new business, there is none. Going to reports, I will congratulate Councillor Noah Donovan on being the recipient of the 2023 MBCC Alumni Award. Congratulations, Councillor Donovan, on that recognition. And may I have a motion, please? It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Councillor Bigger on the question. On the question, Councillor Bigger.
Yeah, I just thank you, Your Worship. I also wanted to say congratulations to Councillor Donovan. It's a great accomplishment. I watched your video. I thought it was very well done, and thought you presented very well. Quite official seeming there behind your behind the horseshoe, but congratulations, and I hope that'll be a great influence on other young leaders. Well done.
Thank you. Please vote now. Councillor Donovan. You're in favor? Yes. Motion carried 5-0. Item number 13, business arising from Committee of the Whole. Property purchase, Darling Property, 26 Neck Road, and 2023 General Capital Reserve Fund transfer. Councillor Olson.
Yes, be it resolved that the town of Quispamsis proceed with the purchase of property located at 26 Neck Road, PID 71969, at a price of $385,000, subject to the provisions of the purchase and sale agreement, with funding to come from the General Capital Reserve Fund.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Bigger. On the question, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our treasurer. Given the fact that we've talked a lot about reserves in this last while, and that out of the general capital fund, the reserves are have more leeway. You can put them on different things. This piece of land that we're buying is also for public purpose, lands for public purpose. We have $160,000 in that reserve fund right now. So I'm wondering why we're not taking some of the land for public purpose, which is very restricted for us to use, where this, if you use, and I'm no lawyer, but if we use part of land for public purpose and we use part from capital, it still leaves us the ability to sell some of it off if we wish to as well. So through you, Your Worship, to our treasurer.
Ms. Brandon, would you like to respond, please?
Sure, through your worship. So our land for public purposes reserve has about $160,000 in it. It's not sufficient enough to cover off this large purchase, and I would not recommend depleting it. We do use that reserve for smaller pieces of property that, you know, when we go through different things, we collect some lot fees from that. It's I just wouldn't recommend depleting that reserve, but again, that's council's prerogative.
Thank you. Follow-up, Councillor Miller.
Yes, thank you. And I wouldn't want to deplete the whole thing either. I guess my question is, what would be the normal we would spend on some of these events as you spoke with? Is it, if we took $100,000 out of it and left 60 for this year, would $60,000 be a normal sufficient year? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Ms. Brandon.
I would have to take that away and do some research and some information digging on that.
Thank you. On the question, Councillor Donovan.
Thank you. And I did just want to say thank you very much to the Director of Community Services for bringing forward this item. I know she's had a rough little while as far as everything going on with the budget, but it certainly is not often. I believe I remember her saying that we get an opportunity to purchase something like this, and I do really believe that this will benefit our community very much, and I do appreciate the work of her and her staff and our legal team in getting this deal closed. Thanks.
Thank you very much. On the question, please vote now.
The vote is in progress right now. The motion for reserve is in the next motion. This is the one on ratifying the land purchase. But it says funding to come from the general capital reserve fund.
They're together.
Okay, well, you can check with the town treasurer. The vote is in progress here. She has another one on the reserve transfer. It's a proposed motion after this one. But yes, should we change that? There is people that have already voted except.
The vote is not complete. Ms. Brandon, the question here is, excuse me,
Yeah.
please, I can't hear. Go ahead.
Through your worship. So at this point in time, the funding can come from the general capital reserve. When I take the information to look into the land for public purpose at year end, when we do our further reserve transfers, if I feel like we can move some of that funding, I'll bring that forward at that point in time in December. I just don't have the information to be able to do that. But for cash flow purposes, I need to collect the money from one of the reserves at this point in time. But if there is any movement, if I can take 100,000, and I need the time to be able to do that analytical work, and if I can, I will bring that forward to council in December when we do all of our year-end reserve transfer motions.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. On the question, motion carried 5-0.
So I guess she would still need this one.
So the final motion, item number 2 of item number 13B. Councillor Donovan.
Be it resolved that $385,000 be transferred from the General Capital Reserve Fund to the General Capital Fund to fund the purchase of land located at 26 Neck Road.
It's been moved by Councillor Donovan, seconded by Councillor Olson. On the question, Councillor Miller.
Oh, sorry. No.
We're good. On the question, please vote now. Motion carried 5-0. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by... Motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Donovan. On the question, please vote now. Councillor Miller, did you vote? Thank you. Motion carried 5-0. Have a safe drive home, everyone. Remember, it's a little darker out than our last meeting.